there. Welcome to the Brown Bag Mystery Series. We are ready to launch on our new program for this year, and we're really excited about it. We've been doing mystery quilts for quite some time, and when we do a mystery quilt, what we like to do is we listen to our customers and we listen to what you are saying you need, you want, you wish you had. And I found that over the years of doing mystery quilts, many people tell me, I have so much fabric and I love it all, and every time I see more fabric, I want more fabric. Let's first get one thing right out of the way. We are not collectors, we are not hoarders, we are curators of fabric. We love the colors, we love playing with the colors. I think a mystery quilt is a really good opportunity for you to get into your fabric stash and for you to pull out things and pull things together. But I really encourage you to do one thing for sure. Trust me. When I say to go and pull out one of your favorite stashes of fabric, you're going to pull it out and you're going to cut into it and you're going to start sewing it. The number one reason people don't move forward on getting things quilted or sewn is that too many times we just think too hard. We worry that the fabric isn't the right match for the pattern. So what we're doing with mystery quilts is we're taking the pattern worry out of your hands. We're calling it a brown bag mystery for the whole year because over the years of doing mystery quilts, every time we do a mystery quilt, people get done and they look at the pattern, and while these designers have done a really good job with their pattern, everybody looks at the patterns and they go, I would have never picked that quilt for this fabric, but it always works. I really would encourage you to trust me on this. I don't know what's in your fabric stash, but I know from doing this over the years, I've never had anyone who has been unhappy with what they have picked to go with their mystery quilt. We're calling it a brown bag mystery because when you come next week, excuse me, what you're going to do is you're going to get your pattern and it's going to be in a brown bag. I'm going to encourage you not to open it up. I'm going to encourage you to bypass the temptation to open up. Now for myself, one of the things that I like to curate is I like to curate fabrics by people that are really important to me. For example, I have a huge collection of Kay England's fabrics. I'm not necessarily someone who enjoys reproduction fabrics, but I do love Kay, and she's taught me to develop a taste for the kinds of fabrics that she's interested in. I'm fascinated by her, I'm fascinated by her story, and I actually have started to grow really, really attached to her fabrics. Every time I look at a fabric, I remember a great story she told me. So one of the collections that I'm working out of for this one is I'm working out of my collection of Kay England fabrics. The other collection is really like the polar opposite for looks, and I went into my Kona Solid collections. I had a couple of really great fat quarter collections, one's in purples and one's in teals and greens, and I actually brought the two of them together for this mystery because as I looked at it, this mystery that we're doing at this point works with 4 color families. Now that might be color families and it might be value families, and that's the biggest part of what we're going to do with this. As I got working on these pieces, I might look at them and say, I think I could use a little bit more purple or a little bit more blue. And I would really hope that you would come to the store and pick up more fabric. But of course, we don't often have to be told that, and we are ever so grateful that you support us so that we can do things like the mystery quilts. So I really want you to embark on this journey with me. I want you to trust us. I think I've said that a couple of times now. But the reason I say trust is not that this costs you a whole lot to participate in, but I'd say trust in that I know that you are a very good fabric selector. I'm going to be your guide to help you to cut into that fabric, use the brown bag mystery to make the most of this. Now, when you come next week to this, if you send me a photograph of what you worked on in this first step, there's going to be a surprise for everybody who does that. And then we will share those photos with each other because we want you to see that there are other people on this journey who are doing the same thing as you're doing, trusting us on the brown bag mystery. You can always come to the meetings that you see on our calendar, and you're welcome to come and attend, and then we'll get the videos posted and the instructions posted for you in time. So, before we pull out our rotary cutter, let's pull out our fabric and let's play in the stash of fabric. I'm going to walk you through not only what I chose, but some other options that I thought, could have chosen that. So let's get going and dig into our fabric. Doesn't that sound like fun? So this is my Kona Solid collection that I wanted to work with. Aren't those the prettiest purples? They're solid fat quarters. And so what I found was that to do this Mystery Monday, I had to add some other fabrics to it. So I brought in some teals, some aquas, all Kona Solids, some of them from my stash, and some of them from another fat quarter collection. I sorted out my Kona Solids into the 4 color families as you saw on your paper on your instructions. And as you can see, I have quite a few of them. Some of them look like they mush over a little bit, so I laid them out a little bit more to study it, and I actually have quite a bit too much fabric, especially when you see the yardages that I included on the pattern. So I decided to cull a few out, set them aside, parse it down a little bit to only having about 7 fat quarters, knowing of course that I still have too much fabric. I wanted a variety of color. My next step was a little bit more tedious, and I had to iron out all my fabrics. So I pressed them out flat so that I'm ready to go and I'm ready to get cutting. So I'm pretty excited about the way the colors were. Now after I did each parts of the cuts, what I did was I rolled up my fabric because next week I'm going to be cutting from that again. I didn't want to fold it again lest it would have to be unfolded. Some other color families that I was looking at was I was looking at my collection of Vanessa's fabrics from V&Co. This is a part of projects that I had started with other pieces, some fat quarters, some fat eighths even. And so I divided that out in case I was going to do that for Mystery Monday. Look at the great color family I have going on here. This is also on your color chart as an option called V&Co. Now after I pull my fabrics from this, I really like to put them all back together. As you notice, I don't do a lot of folding. I just kind of bundle them up. You can even see a rolled up fat quarter or two in there. And I roll them up, and then what I'll do is I'll tie them all together because I'm more likely to use them all together. Now the first time I tied this, it was quite a bundle, and it was pretty tall and pretty unwieldy. So then I sorted it down. This is probably the most amount of fussing with my fabric collection. I like playing with my fabrics, opening up the bundle and working with it. I also looked into a bundle that I had of batiks. Picked up this bundle of batiks that I had, fat quarters, sorted the batiks out kind of by color family. If you notice, I've got some mixtures here, and I thought, well, wonder if I could make this work into 4 colorways. So I started dividing it down, and as you can see with the division, I only came up with 3. This means I'd probably need to do a little bit of shopping. Let me go to my collection of Kay's fabrics, and you can see here that I divided it down like you see in your color chart on your instructions into the 4 color families. One of them is an obvious light, but what I got really excited about was this red coming out. Now the red was definitely the dark piece of it, but as you notice when you look at the red, it's not the only dark piece in there, so I had to do a little bit of renaming because I also had some browns in there. Now in browns, according to your chart, you'll see I made it, that was my brown. So that's the start of this. We're looking forward to getting going with this, and we're going to go on into cutting the fabrics. Now, as you cut your fabrics, we've started off with our colors. We're going to work out of the color families. And I did all the cutting for this first step. And I stacked them up together. I think these are just adorable. So you only see 3 of the cutting families for the first part of it. Now when I cut my units up, I can't tell you how many strips I cut because each one of them has a different numbering. But on this one, I've got my Kona Solids that I worked with, and I started working on cutting them, and then I used my favorite tool, and that's one of my square rulers. I love using my square ruler for cutting out squares because that's what it is. And it gives me a nice group. I usually cut off, like if I go up to double my width, and then I trim it down, and then I work backwards. As you can see with this, I prefer to cut my 4 patches up entirely into squares. They piece up so much better. Anybody who still has you putting strips together, you kind of need to challenge that. So when we look at the fabrics, I really would love to lay it out and see this color variation. Isn't this going to be just so pretty? And I like having these groups together. Again, when I'm done with each group, I'm going to roll them up. Now, when I cut my strips, when I start off with, I go past the width and I double it because on this one I'm going to cut 2 strips. So I went ahead, went past my width, and then I come back and I trim the 2. That is a strip cutter over there. It's not a square cutter. So I only use that for cutting my strips. Strip cutters are long, they're rectangular. So that's the ruler that I prefer to use. I come back and I trim it down into my second set. I've got 2 strips because I did the math a little bit, and I knew how many strips I need to get the total number of squares out of my unit. Then I turn my unit, and yes, Kay England wouldn't be real happy with me, but I do cut both strips at the same time. Maybe not the best if you're losing accuracy, but I'm pretty confident with what I'm doing. Now, I like to show you what I can do, but you do what's best for how you cut. This is how I cut, this is how I work, and I found that it worked really well with this. Now, as I go on to cut those pieces up, I found that I really love doing the math on this to make sure it all kind of comes out even. So I like stacking those guys up. This is one of my colorways that's kind of unique. And then I moved on into my lightest colorway. Now be sure you look at your chart, because on the lightest colorway you're cutting a different width, and it's on your chart. And I have everything all ready to go now. I've got my squares for my 3 colorways. Got my fabrics rolled up, so next week I'll be able to cut the next unit out of it. Now what I did was I started working out of my 3 colorways to start putting together the 4 patches. So I've got my 3 colorways lined up there, got my darks, my dark mediums, and my lights. And then I have to build my first 4 patch out of that. I love the look on this. I did have to stop myself from saying, is this an Amish quilt? Because it's really not an Amish quilt. It's just my dark and dark mediums. And I think it's going to have its own unique flair. Then there's blocks that I'm making with my mediums and my medium lights. So those blocks will be in there. So let's get sewing and let's get working on putting these critters together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what I do when I start sewing my 4 patches together. When I sew the 4 patches together, I'm pretty systematic about it. I sew one entirely before I get going, because otherwise what ends up happening is I make a mistake, I put 2 colors together wrong, and then I make a mistake on the whole thing. So I like to do one entirely. So I'm walking into my machine with my 4 patch, and then I went ahead and I started making my units in the pairs. For example, if I did my dark mediums with my darks, then I go ahead and I complete all of these. I just keep working through my machine, reach around back, clip it off, and do a 4 patch. I don't do all the 2sies together first and then the 4sies. I do them 2 and then 4, and then that way, if you notice off to the side there, I'm finishing up units. So if I go to bed, I at least see that I've finished some of the units, and I celebrate that because I'm pretty excited once I get on a roll. So I keep reaching around the back of my machine, I keep building my 4 patches, and before I know it, the stack of 4 patches that I'm building are pretty high, and I feel pretty good about it. So it's real motivating. I never do 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 to ad nauseum and then come back and do 4s. I like to celebrate this as it goes on. I had a lot of fun working on this. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Now I'm going to share with you the slideshow of the different pieces that I worked on. I want you to take notice as you look through these. I've had several people say to me, oh, these points don't come together quite right, or I have a piece that's hanging over on the edge. I always encourage people to go back and do a couple measurements. One is just to measure the outside of your block, but also if you notice on these pieces, some of them look trapezoid. Well, I have not ironed them. I chose not to iron them because I'm actually going to be matching them up with other pieces that are going to be the same size. As far as with the centers, I would go back and look at those and be looking at how I'm feeling that intersection. The other one is that these are off, frankly, so small, I am not going to be tearing them apart. There were a couple that I adjusted a little bit. Now, when I worked with the browns and the pinks, I had a whole lot of fun with these guys. If you notice, many times that brown and pink looks really, really obvious, but there are some of the pieces that the browns that I picked look a little bit more pink red, and sometimes at the reds there's so much brown in them that they almost look a little bit more brown. I'm going to tell you this, it's okay. It's not a big deal. I lean towards what was mostly red or what was mostly brown. And when we put the whole quilt together, you're going to have an appreciation for that. With scrap quilts, a lot of times we get really, really confused about what's an appropriate scrap quilt. What I tend to find is that we really overthink this. Again, just like I told you in the earlier part of this presentation, we really overthink mystery quilts. and we overthink a lot of our quilts. So when I take it out to a mystery, I'm going to give you some coaching, but I'm going to expect you to trust the process. The cool thing is when you say, hey, I'm going to get these 4 patches done because Jill has something for me, then let that be a little bit of a motivator. But the other part of the motivation is going to be, wow, what a blast this is. Now, be sure that you're sending me pictures this week because I want to see the pictures of your 4 patches. We're going to be sharing that next week at the start. Thanks.